Sorry, I knocked everything.
Testing. I'll let you do that. Testing, testing. Testing's too loud. Testing, testing, testing.
And I can control them back to the room.
Okay. Did I get all the kids?
Shalom, Chavarim, Umishpacha, friends and family. Why don't we take our seats? We're about to begin here. I just wanted to make a few notes here before we begin. In the very back, in the library area, we do have some snacks on the table there, some kosher snacks. So feel free to grab those. We have some plates back there as well. Of course, we always have the coffee and the water to enjoy, and everybody knows where the bathrooms are. Yeah. All right. Well, most of you know why you're here tonight, right?
You're now a coin collector.
How many here have seen Reuven Prager teach before? All right. Wow, there's a lot of people. That's great. Well, I always get something. He has a lot of information he shares, and I always miss something. And so each time that I listen to him, I'm always catching something different and something new. But without further ado, please give a big hand for Reuven Prager.
Did I get all the kids? All right. How many folks have... you guys move up. I got to pass 100 things around. I need people up here. The guys in the back, come up front. Everybody has to be within arm's distance of someone else. All right. How many folks have never heard me speak before? All right, so you guys have to laugh at my jokes. Well, the people that hear me time and time again, it's hard to get them to laugh, so I need new people. Cool. For those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, my name is Reuven Prager. I'm originally from Miami Beach, Florida. That's why I can speak English. I've been living in Israel for the last 36 years, and for the last 30 years of that, I've been serving as a Levite on duty, researching and restoring ancient Israelite customs in preparation for rebuilding the temple. Let me define that. When I say that I serve as a Levite on duty, my father was a Levite, my father's father was a Levite, my father's 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 father was a Levite, all the way back to biblical Levi. Now you remember that when the Israelites entered the land of Israel, the land was apportioned amongst 11 of the 12 tribes. The tribe of Levi, we did not receive a portion of the land, we received a duty. Our duty was to provide the physical vessels necessary for the spiritual well-being of the people. When it came time to construct the tabernacle, it was the Levites who constructed it. During our 40 years of wandering in the desert, when it came time to move our encampment, it was the Levites who would disassemble the tabernacle, the Levites who would carry it, the Levites who would reassemble it when we got to our new campsite. When we entered the Holy Land and we built the Holy Temple, if a Kohen, a priest, needed a vessel, it was a Levite who provided it, and if the vessel didn't exist, it was a Levite who created it. We were the doctors, we were the teachers, we were the singers, we were the one tribe that was set aside to minister to the spiritual needs of the people. And in lieu of our service, we were granted the tithe. That first tithe that we were commanded to give to the Levites was to free us from worldly pursuit so we'd be available to minister to the spiritual needs of the people. A Levite is in training from age 20 to 25, and from age 25 to age 50, you're on duty. When I moved from Miami Beach to Jerusalem, I had to decide, what am I going to do with my life's work? And the more that I learned, and the more that I learned specifically about the Levites, I came to realize that this was still a valid job offer. Nobody had ever canceled it. So I chose to serve in my God-given career as a Levite on duty. When I say that I research and restore ancient Israelite customs in preparation for rebuilding the temple, that also needs defining. Whatever we're familiar with is contemporary Jewish custom, normative Judaism, the way that Jews do things today. Almost nothing that we do today in contemporary Judaism do we do the way that our ancestors did it. Let me give you an analogy that will help you understand the nature of my work. Let's say that we have a couple that, God forbid, the husband's in a terrible accident. They put him in a full body cast, covers 93% of his body. Just his foot is left outside of the cast. And the doctors come and tell this couple that this poor guy is going to be like that for 2 whole years. So during those 2 years, his wife learns to love him and care for him through his foot. At the end of the 2 years, the doctors come and they remove the cast, and she continues only paying attention to his foot, ignoring the rest of him. That, in a sense, is Judaism today, in case you're wondering where I was going with that. 2,000 years ago, when the Holy Temple was destroyed and we were exiled from our land, we lost the ability to fulfill 93% of our religious customs. The 7% of the commandments that we could pack in a suitcase and take with us in our wanderings in exile, that became the focal point for normative Judaism for the next 2,000 years. Basically keeping the Sabbath and its related laws, the laws of kashrut, how to eat kosher, honoring your parents. But the other 93% of customs that we can no longer perform for real, because the temple had been destroyed and we were exiled from our land, those customs were reinstituted in the first century into a series of what we call in Hebrew zechers, remembrances, so that as we went out into exile, we'd be able to remember what our ancient customs were, so that when the generation arose that merited to return to the land of Israel, we'd remember how to restore our ancient customs. Let me give you a practical for example. In the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verses 37 to 41, God commands Moses to bid the children of Israel to put fringes on the corners of our garments throughout our generations. You guys are all familiar with the talit, right? With the prayer shawl. For the last 2,000 years, the way that we fulfill the commandment of fringes has been by wrapping ourselves in a prayer shawl during the time of prayer. And those of us who would wear our fringes during the course of the day would wear them attached to the four corners of a little undergarment known as the talit katan. Everybody say katan. Katan in Hebrew means small. It's a little four-cornered garment that has holes in the corners we would attach the fringes to and wear these hidden underneath our Gentile apparel. But our ancestors did not fulfill the commandment of fringes on an undergarment or on an artificial prayer shawl. This garment here, this is actually what a talit was before it became a prayer shawl. Some of you might be familiar with this as a seamless garment woven from the top throughout. Right? Now you'll notice that there are two garments here. There's this white silky undergarment. In Hebrew this is called a chaluk. In Arabic it's called a jalabiyah or a galabiyah. And this was biblical underwear for the Middle East. Every man in the Middle East wore one of these long bell dress type of outfits. In fact, if you go to a traditional Muslim country today, like in Egypt or in Jordan, the guys are still boogieing around in these long bell dress type of outfits. An Israelite would distinguish ourselves by the talit that we wore over our chaluk. And this was the way that we fulfilled the commandment from the time that we received the commandment up until the Hadrianic decree of the year 135 that forbade us under penalty of death from fulfilling the commandment. So in the year 135, 136, that garment became a zecher, it became a remembrance. It became a little four-cornered garment that we would attach the fringes to and wear it hidden underneath our Gentile apparel so that we could remember the commandment of fringes but without getting killed for doing so. But because it says in the book of Numbers, you shall put fringes on the corners of your garments throughout your generations, and it's stretching the imagination to consider this a garment. A garment's something you'd put on and, put on and go out in public and consider yourself dressed, either for modesty's sake or as protection from the environment. So at the time that we adopted the talit katan, we developed what became known as the talit gadol. Everybody say gadol. Gadol in Hebrew means large, so that when we could meet secretly behind a locked door in the morning, we could wrap ourselves in a piece of cloth big enough to be considered a garment. Because the talit gadol, it's big enough that it'll cover your torso. And then at the end of the prayer service, we would take our talit and we would fold it up and put it in a bag and carry it out under our arms and continue to wear the talit katan hidden underneath our Gentile apparel for the remainder of the day. But before there was an undergarment, before there was an artificial prayer shawl, this is actually what a talit was. So when I say that I research and restore ancient Israelite customs in preparation for rebuilding the temple, I take the contemporary custom of exile, the way that we've been doing it for the last 2,000 years, research it, restore it, put it back out on the streets of Jerusalem, and today there's no more Titus or Vespasian or Hadrian, these Roman emperors over us, telling us, no, you can't fulfill the commandment. We're back in the land, we're free people upright in our land, and yet so many of us are still only paying attention to the foot. So that's a really long introduction, but that gives you an idea of the nature of my work when I say that I research and restore ancient Israelite customs.
What's the word for the undergarment?
In Hebrew it's called a chaluk. In Arabic it's called a jalabiyah or a galabiyah, depending where you're from. Does that answer? It's like a bell dress type of outfit, and that's what every man in the Middle East wore as his outfit. Male. Got it? All right. 30 years ago, I established a workshop in Jerusalem called Beged Ivri. Everybody say Beged. Beged in Hebrew means garment, and Ivri means Hebrew or Israelite. So Beged Ivri means Hebrew garments or Israelite garments, biblical garments. For the last 30 years, my workshop in Jerusalem, which is basically me sitting behind a sewing machine, has been producing a beautiful line of biblical garments for the modern Israelite, so that those of us who've returned to the land, we can begin to dress and look like we live there. The black hats and black coats that are associated with Orthodoxy, That's cute and it's nostalgic, but our ancestors did not fulfill the commandment of fringes on a rag hidden underneath Gentile apparel. We wore our tzitzit as a beautiful outer garment. Now you know that living in Israel, you're in the army now. Right? So I got inducted into the army. They gave me my uniforms, and they expected me to fulfill the commandment of fringes on one of these dinky things hidden underneath my army uniforms. And I'm Mr. Biblical Garments, right? So what did I do? I took all my army uniforms home, and I redesigned them into four-cornered garments, right? You haven't seen this before. You've heard about it, but you haven't seen it before, right? I sewed them closed in the front, so... right? I sewed them closed in the front, opened them up on the sides. I got a religious ruling that zippers are considered open even in the closed position. I got khaki-colored zippers so there wouldn't be a problem with camouflage. And I redesigned all my army uniforms into four-cornered garments and tied tzitzit on the corners of my army uniforms. I got to the base, right? What did they do? They tried me for destroying army property. And I said at my trial, I said, destroyed it, I sanctified it, I make a bracha, I make a blessing on my uniform when I get dressed in the morning. And they didn't think it was so funny. They threw me out of the army. They figured I was nuts, get rid of him quick before he infects anybody, right? Now, I was the paymaster of my base. The annual financial report came due, and nobody knew how to fill out the paperwork. So 11 days later, they called me and asked me if I wouldn't mind please coming back and finishing my army service, which I did with my tzitzit attached to the corners of my uniforms. Someone asked me in the last group, well, what happened at the trial, right? So they ordered me to return my uniforms to their previous status, and I ignored the order, and they ignored me ignoring the order. Tzitzit for all occasions. But if you ever do want to get out of reserve duty, bring me your uniforms. I never did a day of reserve duty. I can't figure out why. You know? So tzitzit for all occasions. Now, for the most part in Israel, the guys today wear pants wearing public. Like all you guys are wearing pants. Some people are going back to the chaluk, but that's really few and far between, and most of them are real nutcases. Most of the guys in Israel are wearing pants, right? So I made a modern adaptation of the biblical talit. I call it a tunic. It's the garment that I'm wearing. It's a four-cornered garment, open the majority of the way on the sides. That's why it comes with a sash so you're not flapping in the wind. And I make a beautiful line of tunics for all occasions. I have super lightweight cottons for the hot summer days, heavier cottons for winter, beautiful Damascus silks for Sabbaths and feasts, festivals, or if you just have good taste. Right? Beautiful line of tzitzit for all occasions. Now, you'll notice that the garment that I'm wearing and all the garments that I offer include the required biblical blue fringe. Any Hebrew speakers, Hebrew class graduates here? Yeah. Can you tell everybody what the word in Hebrew for blue is? No, blue. Kachol. Everybody say kachol. And the ch comes from the top of the back of your mouth. Then you have to spit it out. Kachol. Kachol in Hebrew means blue. Powder blue, royal blue, cobalt blue, turquoise blue, any shade of blue from any dye source. But concerning this commandment, the Torah doesn't use the word kachol, it uses the word techelet. Everybody say techelet. A specific blue dye. The same way if I were to say crimson or Bordeaux, that could be any shade of from any dye source. But if I were to say cochineal, you know that we're talking about a specific dye that comes from a specific insect that produces a specific color. So likewise, the Torah was being specific in requiring a ptil tchelet, a twist of a particular blue dye. Now, when the Romans destroyed the temple in the year 70 and they took us out into exile, they didn't just want to beat us on the spot. They wanted to make sure that we didn't come back and reestablish ourselves in the land. How did they accomplish that? As they took us out into exile, they separated between generations. Keep in mind that up until the destruction of the Second Temple, our traditions were strictly an oral tradition. We passed our traditions down from mother to daughter, from father to son, from generation to generation. The Mishnah had not been written yet, and the Talmud hadn't even been conceived of. We passed our traditions down generation to generation orally. When the Romans took us out into exile, they separated between the generations so that we wouldn't be able to pass our traditions down to the younger generation, so that younger generation would not maintain a longing to come back and reestablish themselves in the land. Because when you remove a people from their traditions, they lose their indigenous connection to the land. And we lost many of our traditions in the first century, one of which was what was the dye source for the required biblical blue fringe. Now, our ancestors told us that the tchelet came from a marine source as opposed to the plant world that they refer to as the chilazon. The question for the last 2,000 years has been, what was the chilazon? They didn't give us a Latin name to identify it by, but they gave us 11 different characteristics describing its body shape, its movement, its environment. And based on those 11 characteristics, in 1887, one of the great sages of Europe, Rabbi Gershon Henoch Leiner, from the city of Radzin, left his village, went down to the Mediterranean, and spent several years researching every marine source, everything that lives along the Mediterranean coastline, until he came to the conclusion that he had positively re-identified the chilazon as a species of squid, Latin name Sepia officinalis. You all know what a squid is, right? It's like a little octopus. It's got 8 tentacles, which correspond to the 8 fringes of the tzitzit, right? So Sepia officinalis has 2 blood sacs. One is its lifeblood. One is a black blood that it uses as a camouflage when it's being chased in the water. It spritzes this ink into the water that makes a cloud that allows it to escape from its predator, which, by the way, is the function of tchelet for mankind, because it says, "Uritem oto," you shall see it and remember. It's like if I decided that, me and Seth, we just drove from Miami with some 5,500 miles to get here, and instead of coming here tonight or today and sharing words of Torah with you, we'd go find a local pub and do something dumb and go get drunk, and as we're running to do something stupid, my tzitzit get caught in the car door, or they get caught between bumpers of cars as I'm running to do something dumb, right? And as I reach down to extract them and I see the tchelet, they ask in the Talmud, well, what color is tchelet? What color is blue? They answer, well, it resembles the sky. They go, yeah, but what color is that? They say, well, it resembles the sea. They go, yeah, but what color is that? They say, well, it resembles the sapphire. And they ask one last time, yeah, but what color is that? And they answer, it resembles the Kisei HaKavod, the holy throne of glory that God sits upon, is made of tchelet. So as I'm running to do something dumb and my tzitzit get caught and I reach down to extract them and I see the tchelet and I make the association, God's throne, God's presence in my life, my commitment to live by His commandments, it creates that cloud that allows me to escape blowing it spiritually. So the same way that the ink of the squid saves it from its physical predator, the tchelet saves mankind spiritually, as it says, "Uritem oto," you shall see it and remember, and not run after your eyes and after your heart, which can lead you astray. Since 1887, the Radziner Hasidim, the followers of Rabbi Gershon Henoch Leiner, have continued to produce the required biblical blue fringe, and if you already have a garment or a prayer shawl and you only have the white fringes on it, you can now acquire a set of these. You'll notice on the back of the packaging it says free tying instructions at begedivri.com. We have the best guides available anywhere in the world. You can work right off the computer screen or print them out, 9-page fully illustrated guides, so that someone who's never tied tzitzit before can successfully retie their garment or their prayer shawl, including the required biblical blue fringe. Now, to be fair, in the last century there were 2 other opinions of what the chilazon was. Rabbi Herzog, who was the first chief rabbi of Israel, when he was a young man in England, he wrote his doctoral thesis on the dye source for the required biblical blue fringe, and he came to the conclusion that this snail, Jantina, that this was the chilazon that the ancients had spoken about. He never succeeded in extracting a dye from it, and truth be told, it's not a shell that's ever been used by any culture for dyeing. It does emit a secretion, but it won't take to fiber. And he did recant his opinion in favor of Radzin prior to his passing away. I'm going to pass this around. When you receive it, please receive it open-handed, because the shell doesn't weigh 2 grams and it'll crush in your hand. That's Jantina, very interesting snail. It builds itself a raft of bubbles, and it spends its entire lifetime bobbing up and down on the surface of the ocean. And every so often, thousands of them will come together. They'll hook up their rafts, make like a flotilla, which is now a bad word in Israel, right? Jantina. There's a 3rd group in Israel that's been producing a blue dye from this snail called the Trunculus murex. And we're going to speak more about this one in just a moment. Throughout the Torah, that's a hardy shell. That one won't break. Throughout the Torah, there are 3 colors that seem to have a spiritual significance. The first of which that we spoke about at length was the tchelet that everybody needed for their fringes. There was a second color called argamon. Argamon is biblical purple. And argamon was produced from the second snail coming around, Trunculus murex. This is raw wool dyed with argamon, biblical purple. There was a 3rd color called tolat shani. And tolat shani was a crimson produced from the back of insects that live in the bark of oak trees in the Galilee in northern Israel. And what they would do is they would take these insect backs, dry them out, crush them up, make a dye batch, they would take the wool, prepare it with what's called a mordant, which is a substance that opens the cellular structure of the wool to allow it to accept the dye. And this is raw wool dyed with tolat shani, biblical crimson. These three colors, blue, purple, and crimson, were used initially for the drapings of the tabernacle. They were used in the priestly garments. Like, this is not a priestly garment. This is a lay Israelite talit that any of us could wear, but it is woven in the colors of the priestly garments, blue, purple, and crimson. And of course, when we built the Holy Temple, there were two chambers, the outer chamber called the Holies, and the inner chamber called the Holy of Holies, excuse me, separated by a double curtain that was also woven out of these three colors, blue, purple, and crimson. One last word about ancient dye stuffs, in one moment. In the Talmud, they teach that in the latter Second Temple period, there were some folks who weren't so honest, they weren't so scrupulous. And they figured, you know, the tchelet, it's so much more expensive to produce than any other dye, maybe they can make a knockoff, make a phony tchelet, make a quick buck, a quick shekel. And in the Talmud, they call a phony tchelet, they call it kla ilan. Kla ilan was wool dyed with indigo from a plant source, as opposed to the tchelet, which came from a marine source. It was much less expensive to produce, and it was indistinguishable to the eye. Looking at it, you couldn't determine whether or not you had the real McCoy or not. And from that teaching, we learn that whenever you acquire tchelet, you get it from a God-fearing source, somebody who's knowledgeable in tchelet. What I'm going to pass around right now, this is genuine counterfeit tchelet. Any questions about anything I've covered so far? Biblical garments, the commandment of fringes, or biblical colors? Kachol, kachol, kachol.
Is there another possibility for like analogy
Shachelet?
and it has to tie to the actual shell, almost like sound. Or the sound. You could look up some of the etymology, like this is what is possible, but control, of course, we have include.
Not familiar with. You have a source that calls shachelet blue?
Yeah, I mean most strong or other vines.
Yeah. And it's spelled shin chet lamed taf? Shachelet.
Yeah, so it's like maybe tied to the idea of the shell.
Huh. Email that to me September 3rd when I get home. Let me look into that. That's cool. Cool. Women in tzitzit, is that not here? Oh, all right. Is it a question I can ask and answer? Any of you women have a question about fulfilling the commandment of tzitzit? It's funny, you know, I speak for some far out groups, right? But you'd be surprised how many get haridi over that issue, you know? Like, not our women. Yes. Cool. Thank you for asking. The question is, first of all, can women fulfill the commandment of tzitzit? Right? Halacha, Jewish law, is very clear on the subject. Men are obligated and women are permitted. And anybody who teaches anything beyond that is just expressing chauvinism. If you went to any Orthodox rabbi and asked him, me as a woman, can I fulfill the commandment of tzitzit? He'd make like a prune face, you know, and say that's sort of a man's custom. But if you were to remind him that King Saul's daughter, Michal, who married King David, she wore tzitzit. Bruriah wore tzitzit. The commentators Rashi and Rambam, their wives and daughters wore tzitzit. Rav Yehuda Nasi, who codified the Mishnah, every woman, including his maidservants in his house, all the women wore tzitzit. So if you went back to this rabbi and said, yeah, but what about Michal? What about Bruriah? What about the wives and daughters of Rashi and Rambam? He'd say, well, those were exceptional women. But I think we realize today that all of you women are exceptional women, and you have us well trained to boot, right? Bottom line is men are obligated, women are permitted. If you're going to fulfill the commandment as a woman, you do need to do it differently than the men in your community, because men and women can't wear the same garment, and tzitzit have to be attached to the corners of a garment, right? So if the men traditionally have a wool tallis with black stripes, go for white stripes, something more feminine. I make a beautiful line of hand-painted silk taluses, especially for the ladies. I make a chiffon talus a guy wouldn't be caught dead in, right? It's angelic on a woman. Chiffons are very, you know, you guys don't know what chiffon is. You'd all be laughing. Yeah.
Often we'll recommend like a head covering, a bigger head covering. What do you think about that?
Sure, you know, they, I guess, like sort of like a scarf shawl type with tzitzit on it for like candle lighting and stuff like that. For sure, you're not obligated to fulfill a commandment. You're permitted to. You just need to do it differently than the guys in the community. Cool. And any other questions? Yes.
Question about Gentiles. What are halakhic views on?
That's a good question. If you ask like any Orthodox rabbi, he'll say no. There was a halacha that you can't sell tzitzit to Gentiles because there was a day back in the old country that a Gentile would put on, he'd have like a wagon, you know, a guy with a wagon and a donkey kind of thing. He'd put on tzitzit so that a Jew would feel comfortable getting onto his wagon to travel with him, and then he'd rob him or kill him. So they made a, you know, because of deception. So they made a law that you can't sell tzitzit to Gentiles because they were deceiving people and taking advantage of them, right? And that's, you know, like if you went into any standard Haredi ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, they were like, no, of course not, you know. So there was a time that was a problem. You know, I guess it greatly depends on what your intention is. You know, if your intention is deceitful, then it's not a good thing. If your intention is to, you know, because you identify with the Torah and you want to fulfill God's commandment and you feel part of, you know, I guess. I mean, there are a lot of people back home that would definitely condemn me, you know, for coming out and speaking to groups that aren't halakhically Jewish and stuff like that. But what are you going to do? Any other questions about it? Yes. As long as it's a four-cornered garment that the majority of the way is open on the sides. Keep in mind that we're not obligated to wear tzitzit. If we're wearing a four-cornered garment, we're obligated to put tzitzit on the corners of that garment. And that's why we specially make a four-cornered garment that allows us to fulfill the commandment. Nobody's obligated to wear tzitzit. But if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you're obligated to put tzitzit on it if you're a man, and you're permitted to if you're a woman. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, what kind of do they use? Because it's more of a...
They're using from the Trunculus murex, from that second snail that came around. Yeah. From that, right. Cool. The second project that we took from thought to physical reality was to restore our ancient marriage ceremony. You all familiar with Jewish weddings? We get married, we stand under a... Let me show you how we really do it. On the day of our weddings, we crown our brides with a Jerusalem of gold bridal crown. It was a crown of pure gold depicting the walls of Jerusalem. And once again, this is what our brides look like, crowned with the Jerusalem of gold bridal crown. It was a crown of pure gold depicting the walls of Jerusalem. And every bride in Israel would be crowned on the day of her wedding. And you would not walk to your wedding, but rather you were carried like a queen on a royal wedding litter known as the Aperion. Aperion. The biblical sources, the book Song of Songs, you might know as the Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, where it describes the wedding litter made for King Solomon's wedding. Now, I don't know if King Solomon made 1,000 of these or used the same one 1,000 times, but every bride in Israel, a little biblical humor there, every bride in Israel was carried to her wedding on an Aperion, and you were carried not to the chuppah, but rather to the chuppat chatanim, or the canopy of bridegrooms. Right? You see this crimson dome? For the last 2,000 years, our chuppah was a flat cloth. Very often we used a talit, we used a prayer shawl. It wasn't a talis, it was a kippah. It was a dome made of pure crimson silk with fine beaten gold work. Now, take a close look at this photo, and you'll see it better when it comes around to you. You'll notice that at this wedding, the couple got to the wedding hall, they took one look at our chuppah, and they said to themselves, haven't seen a chuppah look like that for 2,000 years, we better hedge our bets. So they strung up a talit, they strung up a chuppah of exile underneath the canopy of redemption, which shows you the difficulty and the nature of our work. First you have to research this stuff out, then you have to restore it, then you have to go convince everybody that what you've restored is real. You know, because tradition, we got so used to the flat cloth tallest form of chuppah, that we lost sight that was instituted as a zecher, as a remembrance to remind us what a chuppah really was. Now, when I was bringing this project from thought to physical reality, I knew I needed a team of carriers. You see these guys in blue and gold? These are Jerusalem's royal litter bearers. I put an ad in the Jerusalem Post. It ran for 6 weeks. Can we like quiet him or take him in the back or something? Because I'm losing my train of thought. All right. I put an ad in the Jerusalem Post. It ran for 6 weeks, seeking 10 good men. You had to be 6 foot to 6'5", bearded, permanently living in the land of Israel. You had to be the magus, the heavy machine gunner in the infantry units, the guys that carried a Belgian mag, 50 caliber Rambo. I needed big, strong guys. You had to have a strong sense of theatrics and be looking for an extra income. 44 men replied to the ad. The youngest was 18 years old. The oldest was 73 years old. I mean, he was tall enough. He was cute, but he was scrawny. I needed bulk. I needed big, strong guys, right? I chose 10 guys out of the 44. I put them through 2 weeks of basic training on the roof of my building with me as the bride until they learn how to pick it up together, turn left together, turn right together. You don't want to dump the bride, you know? These guys are really hot. Jerusalem's royal litter bearers. For those of you who are already married, so you shouldn't feel left out, if you have a significant anniversary coming up, your 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, 30th, 40th, 50th, you still love her, bring your bride to Jerusalem. I'm glad you're listening. The last group didn't get that. Bring your bride to Jerusalem. We will crown her with the Jerusalem of Gold bridal crown, carry her through the streets of Jerusalem on a royal wedding litter to the accompaniment of shofar blowers and harpists, and we'll recreate a biblical wedding for your anniversary celebration. Any questions about anything that I've covered so far? Yes?
I've seen about that on your website.
We charge $1,500 for a wedding. This project in Israel is registered as a nonprofit organization, and we've never turned anybody locally down for lack of funds. You know how sometimes you have a wedding where the parents of the bride don't like the groom and they ain't coming to the wedding? We had a couple brought to our attention that both sets of folks ain't coming to the wedding. You know, I mean, never. These guys didn't have a shekel between them, right? So I called all the guys, and of course they volunteered their time. We volunteered the equipment. They got married in Bnei Brak on the other side of the country, so we had to schlep this stuff from Jerusalem all the way to Bnei Brak. The wedding hall was the roof of a 3-story building, so we had to get all this stuff up onto the roof. But it's a wedding that's still talking about 14 years later. It was the most joyous occasion you ever saw in your life. They didn't pay a penny. They didn't have a penny. You know, so if they can cover, like most of the $1,500 goes to actually do the wedding. I got 8 salaries and a truck and a tender to bring the guys to the wedding site. So if they can cover whatever they can cover, you know, and if they can't cover it, we'll do it anyway. You know, but we charge $1,500. Like if you're coming from abroad, it's another ticket. It's another airplane ticket. You know, yeah.
The bride would be taken from where to where?
Well, in the ancient days, right, back in the day when we were all living within the walls of Jerusalem, she would be carried from her father's house to the house that her groom, like what they did is they used to do an engagement party, and then the engagement would last for 12 months. During those 12 months, the chatan, the groom, would build the house that they were to live in, and at the day of the wedding, they would pick the bride up. It was like the limousine of the day, you know. Pick the bride up, you know, at the father's house, carry her to the chatan's house, to the groom's house, where they would do the wedding. Now, what we do practically in Israel, like if it's like the locals, when the locals invite us to do a wedding, they've already chosen a wedding hall and everything, right? So if it's an outdoor kind of thing, so that we'll carry her from here to there. And if it's an indoor thing, we'll do a couple rounds around the wedding hall. You know, people that are coming from abroad are usually coming in smaller groups, right? Like you're not going to have 400 wedding guests. You're going to come a dozen people. Something like we had a wedding, for instance, the 2 wedding pictures coming around. The first one that was very green, like outdoorsy. So the groups that come from abroad, we do the wedding at the Tayelet, at the promenade, which is the most beautiful overlook of all Jerusalem. It shows the old city, the new city. It's just a magnificent stretch, right? You don't need a wedding hall, right? So what happened at that wedding? They came 7 people. The husband and wife, they've been married for 12 years but never had a religious wedding. So they wanted us to do their chuppah wedding, right? So it was the husband and wife, their 10-year-old daughter, grandpa, and a couple of friends or family. There were like 7 people. Now, we went and we did the wedding at the Tayelet, at the promenade, And in Israel, every year they have what's called the Israel Festival, which is like a week-long celebration. They have all kinds of outdoor events. People come from all over the country and all over the world to either participate or view the Israel Festival. The day that we did the wedding, the Israel Festival was doing some kind of kickoff at the promenade. There was about 350 people there. And when we went by with our wedding, with our Pirion, they thought we were part of the Israel Festival, and they all came running to be. So these folks who came with 7 people have like hundreds of people in their wedding pictures. It was amazing, right? Hundreds. I can also provide you with wedding guests, right? All my poor friends back home for a meal, they'll come and they'll dance with the bride and the groom. You know. And of course, you know, you don't have a wedding hall, then we'd rent like a room in a restaurant or something for the group. Yes?
So the crowns were loaned out all the time.
Right, well, I imagine that the wealthy families would have had family heirloom crowns, that generations of daughters would be married with the family heirloom crown, but then they would also probably lend them out to the rest of the community. There was, you know, there would at least be a communal crown. Or a wealthy family would own a crown and lend it to everybody in the village or something like that. Any other questions about anything I've covered so far? In the Holy Temple, there were 2 altars. Is this group is everything making its way to this group? Yeah? And all right, so let's set up another chair for you, because otherwise your lap's not going to be able to hold what's coming. Let's do that. And let me just take the breakable one. There you go. Okay. Each lecture, this one gets a little smaller. I brought 2. one trip, like we're carpeted here, but in one lecture, went bam, and that was it. Okay. In the Holy Temple, there were 2 altars. There was an outer sacrificial altar, and there was an inner altar called the golden altar or the incense altar. And it was rather small. It measured a cubit by 2 cubits high. A cubit is about 50 centimeters, which doesn't mean anything here either, about yay big by yay big by yay big high. It was made of a solid piece of acacia wood overlaid with gold. And every day, twice a day, a priest would go out to the outer sacrificial altar with a pure silver fire pan, like a silver shovel, and he would take a shovel full of burning coals and bring them into the temple, transfer them into a gold fire pan that would then be placed on the surface of the incense altar. A third priest would come in carrying a 2-handled vessel known as the bezich. This is a vessel made out of solid gold. It was restored by the Temple Institute in Jerusalem in 1992. And the priest would come in carrying this 2-handled vessel. A 4th priest would come and open it up and take a handful of a powder mix that was a compound of 11 different spices. No KFC jokes, please. 11 herbs and spices. Rough group. All right. He would drop the powder, the incense powder, on the burning coals, and a pillar of smoke would go straight up and out through the inverted windows of the temple. You know, when we build a building, we put windows in. Normally, we put windows in to let the light in and let the heat in. The temple windows, oh, there you go. Right? The temple windows were designed just the opposite. That's a strange place for windows. The temple windows were designed just the opposite. They were inverted. They were designed to let the light and the heat and the energy out. And they teach that at the moment that the priest would drop the incense powder on the burning coals and that pillar of smoke would go straight up and out through the inverted windows of the temple, that the goats in Jericho would sneeze. You're not all laughing. How many have been to Israel? That's it. Next time I want to see every hand up, you got to put your feet where your faith is, people. Come visit us over in the Holy Land, right? Jericho's about 45 miles away from Jerusalem in the lowest point on earth, down by the Dead Sea. Jerusalem's up on a mountaintop. They teach that women as far away as Jericho did not wear perfume because the smell of the incense emanating outwards from Jerusalem was so strong in the air, you wouldn't have smelled perfume on your skin as far away as Jericho. I'm going to share with you now the 11 original ingredients that were compounded into that incense mix that was burnt twice daily in the temple. When it comes around, just take the stopper out, take a whiff. Love this first one. This first one is called in Hebrew Shemen Tsori, or Shemen Afar Simon. In English, it's known as balsam. That's the most celebrated of all biblical spices. The second one coming around, the stopper fell off and is inside the bottle, so just take it out and smell it like that. The second one is called Ktsia, in English, cassia. This one's going to remind you of Red Hots. Remember Red Hots when we were kids? Take a mouthful, burn your face off, Red Hots? So I used to think that Red Hots were made out of cinnamon. They're not. They're actually made out of cassia. It's a much stronger species of cinnamon, and it's the first of 3 different forms of cinnamon incorporated into the incense. Next one coming around is levona, or frankincense, which is very often mentioned together with? All right. I'll ask that question, get no response. I'm like, uh-oh, wrong group. St. Charles, Missouri. I couldn't get out of there quick enough. Myrrh. They had no idea what I was talking about. So that's myrrh. Next one coming around is cinnamon. Cinnamon from the leaf, as opposed, it's funny, I was in Claremont, Florida last tour, and I said that, and some guy stood up real indignant. He goes, I'm from St. Charles, Missouri. So now I'm like wary of saying it, This next one is cinnamon, which is cinnamon from the leaf, as opposed to the cassia. That's the second form of cinnamon. That's followed by shibolet nard, or spikenard. Some of you have a verse, they washed his feet in spikenard. That's followed by tziporin, which in Israel is clove. That's followed by klufa, which is aromatic bark, which is cinnamon from the bark. This is the third and final form of cinnamon. That's followed by karkum, which is saffron, very popular as a spice on chicken in Israel. That wasn't a joke. The next one coming around, for those of you who've never attended my lecture before, this next one is a smell that you've never smelled in your life. In Hebrew it's called kosht. In English it's called costus. C-O-S-T-U-S. And it cost us a fortune to find it. Costus. It's like one of those onomatopoeia things. Right? Now this last one is called chelbana. In English, galbanum. This one doesn't smell good. This one comes to teach us that amongst every 11 of us, there's one who stinks, but you have to include him. Seriously. No, Rashi teaches that, but you don't say it so funny like that. But all right. Now, I can continue while those are coming around? Yeah? There's a very strict biblical prohibition against preparing the incense in powder form according to specification for any use outside of the temple. And it's one of these lightning strike you dead out of the sky prohibitions. You're absolutely not allowed to do it. The reason we provide these as an essential oil is because as an essential oil, it is invalid for use in the temple. Has no use whatsoever, which allows us to use it outside of the temple as we're doing now for educational purposes. And those of us who are Sabbath observers, you know that we usher the Sabbath out with a blessing over a fragrant spice. Many of us just use cinnamon powder or clove. If you own a set of these, you can go through all 11 of them. It'll add 5 minutes more to your Havdalah ceremony, and when you finish, take a whiff of the room, you'll have a little hint of what Jerusalem smells like during the time of the temple. Now, the reason I provide these as an essential oil is because we're taught not to be a stumbling block before the blind. Are you guys all familiar with the Jerusalem syndrome? All of you? Anybody not? Yep. So Jerusalem syndrome is a bona fide psychological disorder that affects 1 out of every thousands of people that comes to Israel. They get to Jerusalem and they go God crazy. The Arabs call it majnuni, a majnun. I get that a lot. People see me, they go majnuni, right? You have no idea how many times I have outfitted John the Baptist. I kid you not, right? If you wake up in the morning in Jerusalem and you're now King David, you end up at my door to get outfitted because I'm the only guy making biblical garments in the Holy Land, right? So I didn't want to provide the ingredients of the incense in any form that could be brought down to powder. So if you wake up in the morning, you're now like the high priest, you know? No, seriously, right? You have no idea. Those are the cash up front kind of guys. I'd like, no, they come to me and go, I'd like to order 144,000 outfits. I'll start with one. Yeah, no, absolutely. I had one guy, right? He came in with that, and I think he got up to his like 7th or 8th outfit, right? He came, he paid, made it, came, picked it up, paid another one, made another one, another one. He came in to pick up like his 7th or 8th outfit, and he tells me, God told me to get thee hence to Cyprus. Right? They threw him out of the country. No, every year we get a new one, I'm telling you. One of the guys, he was out the actually multi-year. He overlapped with some of the newer ones. Came dressed in sackcloth. Man, this guy was fabulous. He was like Charles Heston on a mount. He had flowing white hair, booming voice. This guy must have spent 20 years in front of a mirror. I'm telling you. No, it's Jerusalem, man. You guys all familiar with who Vendel Jones was? No. You all know who Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark is?
Yeah.
Right. There's a problem with the educational system in this country. Right. Indiana Jones' character is based on a real-life dude, actually a real dead dude, he just died the year before last, named Vendel Jones from Arlington, Texas, who spent the last 3 decades of his life trying to find the lost Ark of the Covenant. Most of the major biblical discoveries of the last 2.5 decades were made by this man, Vendel Jones. Do you remember that amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was one scroll written in copper, the Copper Scroll, because it was meant to survive? Vendel translated the Copper Scroll and used it as an instruction manual to try to locate the hidden vessels from the time of the temple. 1992, he was working a cave in the vicinity of Qumran, by where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, right, that we refer to today as the Blue Cave. They cleared out the cave, they removed the floor stones, and they found underneath 600 kilos of prepared powdered incense mix. 600 kilos, a year's supply of prepared powdered incense mix. Do you have any idea of the significance of that find? There's 243 species of myrrh. We now know which one was used in the incense. It was a mega discovery. He calls Rabbi Goren, the chief rabbi of the state of Israel in 1992, who came down from Jerusalem with an entourage of rabbis, and Vendel asked for permission to burn a minute amount of this incense powder to see if it was still viable. Now, if you've ever been down to the Dead Sea, you know the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because it is dead as a doornail. Right? The salt content of the water, the salinity, is so thick that nothing can live in the water. In fact, it's so thick that nothing can live around the water. It's blighted. The only thing that lives down there are flies, like millions. Like if you ever try to camp at the Dead Sea, you got to bring netting. So Rabbi Goren and the rabbis came to Vendel's campsite, and they burnt a minute amount, like a fingernail's worth, of this incense powder. And for the next 60 days, there was not a bug or a fly in their campsite. Turns out, besides being God's desired smell, it was a fumigation system. Don't tell Orkin, right? But we're taught that one of the miracles of the temple was with all of the animal sacrifices, all of the slaughtering, there were no flies. It created the world's first no-fly zone. Any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Cool. Our next restoration takes us to the book of Exodus, chapter 30, verses 11 till 16, where God commands each of us to give us an atonement for our soul back to God. Was that a sneeze? Bless you. Where God commands, I can't compete with that little guy. Yeah, like I'm losing my mojo here. Right? The book of Exodus, chapter 30, verses 11 till 16, where God commands each of us to give us an atonement for our soul back to God, half a shekel of the holy shekel, which weighed 20 gerah. If you take one piece of information away from my talk today, let it be this. Anywhere where the Torah speaks about shekels, it is never ever referring to money. The shekel was not a currency, it was a weight. And the same way that an ounce is broken down into grams, GR, the shekel was broken down into gerah, GR. There were 20 gerah to the shekel. Now, before I continue, I do things differently than a lot of communities in America. I pass around a plate of money for you guys. That goes over better in some groups than others. All right. On this tray, you have 5 items. You have a small stone weight, which is a genuine 4 gerah weight from the 7th to 8th century BC, from the First Temple period, from a period in the world before there was the concept of money. The concept of money was only introduced to the world in the 6th century BC in Persia, today's Iran. The concept of money did not make its way to the Holy Land until the 4th century BC, introduced by the Greeks. So this is a 4 gerah weight. There are 20 gerah to the shekel, so this is 1/5 of the shekel's weight from the First Temple period, from a period in the world before there was the concept of money. You have 2 silver coins on the tray. The smaller silver coin is a half shekel, minted in Jerusalem in the year 45. 0045. We're in the year 2013. In the year 45, this coin was minted in Jerusalem, and it passed through the treasury of the Second Temple up to 25 times. Temple was destroyed in the year 70. The coin was minted in the year 45. It existed for 25 years prior to the destruction and was reused year after year to fulfill the commandment. If somebody held it in their pouch for 2 or 3 years and it only went 22 times through the treasury of the Second Temple, this coin itself went up to 25 times through the treasury of the Second Temple. The larger silver coin is a genuine shekel minted in Jerusalem in the year 18, 0018. This coin passed the treasury of the Second Temple up to 52 times. When those money changers tables were thrown over, this coin could have been on them. It existed. Now here was the rule. The holiday of Purim, you're all familiar with Purim, right? I got a Purim funny to tell you. The end of the winter tour, right? Like I begin my tour and I end my tour in Miami. I spend like a week, 10 days with my parents in Surfside, right? So for Friday, for Shabbos, I go to get my Shabbos wine, my kosher wine. I go to the Big Daddy's Liquors on 94th and Harding, right? So I walk into the place. The guy takes one look at me. He goes, "You Jewish?" He goes, "Can I ask you a question?" Right? And I always brace myself when I, like you never know what's coming, right? The guy says to me, he goes, "What's the name of that holiday?" This is in February, right? He goes, "What's the name of that holiday that's coming up where all the Jews drink?" I said, "You mean Purim?" He goes, "Purim?" Purim? He got it, like right on the, Right. So the holiday of Purim is the holiday we begin to give the half shekel. What happens on Purim if you don't have half a shekel, all you have is a whole shekel, and you need change of half a shekel, then you had to pay the money changer, the money changer's fee, which consisted of the 2 little bronze coins on this tray. In Hebrew they're known as prutot. You might know them as the widow's mites. You paid 1 prutah for the half shekel you were giving, and 1 prutah for the half shekel you were getting back in change. Just like today, thank you, just like today in Israel, the banks charge you to deposit money, they charge you to withdraw money. There's nothing new under the sun, right? So anywhere where the Torah speaks about shekels, they're never ever referring to money, they're referring to weights. And Israelite weights were always made out of stone, never out of metal, because stone cannot contract or impart ritual impurity. And since what you were giving over to the temple had to be given over in a state of ritual purity, the weights themselves that you weighed your nugget against had to be ritually pure. They had to be made out of stone. You'll notice that they were flat on the bottom so they won't roll off of the scale. They were dome-shaped, very often engraved with their weight value. And this was the way that we fulfilled the commandment of giving the half shekel during the entire period of the tabernacle, the entire period of the first temple, and 100 years into the second temple era, was by weighing silver nugget against stone weights. And not only this commandment, but any commandment that requires payments of shekels of silver, like the 5 shekels of the redemption of the firstborn, or the 50 shekels of the bride price, or even the 400 shekels that Abraham paid for the cave of Machpelah as a burial site in Hebron. He didn't whip out a wad of bills and count out 400 shekels. They weighed 400 shekels of silver bars against stone weights. This was Beged Ivri's collection of First Temple period weights as of a few years ago. I've since just about completed the series. I'm missing like 2 minor weights to have the entire series. Remember that we have an injunction to have honest weights, not to have a heavy set to sell by and a light set to buy by. That's what they're referring to. And this was the way that we fulfilled the commandment of giving the half shekel during the entire period of the tabernacle, the entire period of the first temple, and 100 years into the second temple era, was by weighing silver nugget against stone weights. In the 4th century BC, the Greeks conquered our area, and the Greeks introduced the concept of coinage for the very first time to the Holy Land. And for a period of 200 years, from the 4th century BC till the 2nd century BC, we began fulfilling the commandment using Greek silver shekels and half shekels, known as didrachma and tetradrachma. In the 2nd century BC, the Romans beat the Greeks. They were now the empire, and the Romans operated 2 mints in the Middle East, one in the city of Tyre and one in the city of Antioch. The mint in Tyre, Tyre in Lebanon, produced Tyrian shekels and Tyrian half shekels of a 95% silver purity between the years 127 BC and the year 19 BC. In the year 19 BC, they closed the mint in Lebanon, transferred it to Jerusalem, and continued to produce the coins from 18 BC up until the year 65 in Jerusalem. In the year 65, we rebelled against Rome. Our first act of rebellion was to make our own independent coinage. No more face of a foreign god on the front, no more eagle on the back. We made our first revolt, shekels and half shekels. How did we date these coins? We didn't date them from creation. We didn't date them from a Gentile calendar. We dated the first year's coin, Shin Aleph, Shana Aleph, the year 1 of the liberation land of Israel. Shin Bet, Shin Gimel, Shin Dalet, Shin Hey, the years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the liberation land of Israel. And of course, we lost the war, the temple was destroyed, and that was the end of that. Briefly, under Bar Kokhba in the second revolt, we once again minted coins for 3 years, in the years 132, 133, 134, dating those coins, Shin Aleph, Shin Bet, and Shin Gimel, the years 1, 2, and 3 of the liberation land of Israel. We lost that war as well, and that was the end of the history of the half shekel for the next close to 2,000 years. We're going to jump ahead to Purim of 1996. What happened on Purim of 1996? Hamas, our peace partners, blew up a bomb in Dizengoff Center, killing 13 people, most of them children in their Purim costumes. On Purim. On Purim, right? You all know what Purim is. Most joyous day of the Jewish year. What was their goal? Their goal was to steal our joy on Purim, and they succeeded. They blew up that bomb on Purim morning. The entire house of Israel worldwide went into mourning on our most joyous day of the year. All right? And we waited to hear from our political leaders, our spiritual leaders. We're told that we have to continue with the peace process, but nobody dealt with the spiritual attack perpetrated against the house of Israel that day on Purim. Now, when you have a scenario like that, we're given the Bible to look into for answers. We find in the book of 2nd Chronicles that during the days of King Joash, you might know him as Joash, you know who I'm referring to? During the days of King Joash, the spirit of the people was particularly low. The temple had fallen into disrepair. The people had stopped coming up for the pilgrimage festivals. And King Joash was minded to raise the spirit of the people of his day. How did he choose to do that? He turned to the Levites and he said, go out and restore the custom of giving the holy half shekel. And for the first time in my ancestors' history, we blew it. We didn't act. He calls in Yehoiada, the high priest of that year, and he told him, I told the Levites to restore the half shekel, get to it, go do it. And they did. And everybody gave in their half shekel. And what do we read in the text? Vayismachu kol hasarim v'kol ha'am, all of the government ministers and all of the people rejoiced. Which comes to teach us, if you want to restore rejoicing to the entire house of Israel, the way you do that is by restoring the custom of giving the holy half shekel. 1 year to the day of the bombing, Purim of 1997, the first pure silver holy half shekel in 1,927 years hit the streets of Jerusalem. And if it was their goal to steal our joy on that Purim, we're going to restore it 10,000-fold by restoring the custom of giving the holy half shekel. Now, this coin that was minted on Purim of 1997 in response to the bombing was actually minted to be used for the very first time to fulfill the commandment the following year on Purim of 1998. Why the 1 year delay? Because when you give the half shekel in fulfillment of the commandment, it goes from being a piece of silver to what we refer to in Hebrew as hektish, sanctified property. Sanctified property is some serious stuff. Here, you got the coins there? You got the coins there? Would you have your daughter take the shekel, the large silver coin, put it in the palm of her hand and close her hand around it? Close your hand there. You feel the coolness of that coin in the palm of your hand? Can you feel that coolness? Yeah? Thank you. If that coin was in a state of hektish, and that young lady was feeling hot, and she put that coin in her hand and felt its coolness, she would be liable for misappropriation of sanctified property because she received benefit from hektish, the coolness in the palm of her hand. That's how integral it is. The half shekel is the one commandment that teaches absolute fiscal integrity in religious money matters. There's no shenanigans with the half shekel. So to be responsible, we couldn't just start distributing coins and tell people willy-nilly send them into Jerusalem without creating the infrastructure for a safe and secure collection process. That took a year to establish. So this coin that was minted on Purim of 1997 was actually minted to be used for the very first time to fulfill the commandment the following year on Purim of 1998. How did we date this coin? We didn't date it from creation. We didn't date it from a Gentile calendar. We dated this coin Shin Nun, Shana Nun, the year 50. Because 1998 was the 50th year of Jewish sovereignty over the Holy Land, the 50th year of the State of Israel. And that's how Israelites date our coins. Featured on the obverse on the front of the year 50 coin is the prophetic 10-string Davidic lyre, L-Y-R-E. You remember throughout the Torah, throughout the Bible, there are two types of harps mentioned, the nevel v'kinor, the harp and the lyre. The harp was a 22-stringed instrument, and the lyre, L-Y-R-E, in the first and second temple period was either a 7 or an 8-stringed instrument. The prophet said in the third temple era it would become a 10-stringed instrument. It would no longer be referred to as the kinor. They would refer to it as the asur, from the word eser, from the word 10 in Hebrew. The house of Harari biblical harp makers who have restored harp making to Jerusalem, when they learned that, they immediately left off producing the 8-string lyre and went right into production of the prophetic 10-string Davidic lyre, restored by the House of Harari Biblical Harp Makers in 1983. Yes?
Why do you use half modern Hebrew and half Davidic?
That's an excellent question. Who's got the first revolt shekels? Who's got the picture of the first revolt shekels? Blue background? That one. Everybody turn around and take a look at that picture. You see that coin? That was the first revolt shekel minted in the year 65. Thank you. Now, if you'll notice, the Hebrew on that coin is Paleo-Hebrew. Keep in mind, in the year 65, we hadn't used Paleo-Hebrew in centuries. We had already adopted the Aramaic square form of what we recognize today as Hebrew, right? Yet our ancestors, for whatever reason, reverted to the Paleo-Hebrew on the first revolt shekels. So I figured good enough for them, good enough for us, right? So what I did is I made half the legend in modern Hebrew so people could actually read it, all right? Because only like the super, like real Hebrew geeks would know like Paleo-Hebrew, right? No, seriously, I got a guy that writes me letters in Paleo-Hebrew, and I got to sit there with a chart and figure out what the guy's saying. I can't read it, you know? Yeah. No, seriously, you know. So what I did is I honored our ancestors by using the Paleo-Hebrew on the second half, and I dated the coin in Paleo-Hebrew to honor what our ancestors did in the first revolt, who for some reason chose to do that, even though that already wasn't the lingua franca, wasn't the language in use, it wasn't the lettering in use at the time. That's why. Cool. The year 51 coin for 1999 features the Aperion, the royal wedding litter that we just learned about, that we carry our brides to their wedding on their wedding day. That was restored by Beged Ivri in 1991. The year 52 coin features the Bezich, the two-handled golden incense vessel restored by the Temple Institute in 1992. The year 53 coin features the Nevel, 22-string Davidic harp restored by the House of Harari Biblical Harp Makers in 1984. Now, if you know how to play your Nevel, if you know how to play your harp, the 22 strings of the Nevel correspond to the 22 letters of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. So you could literally play your prayers, right? Can you imagine what Psalms sounds like? You could do a soundtrack of the entire Torah. The year 54 coin features the Jerusalem of Gold bridal crown, the golden crown that we crown our brides with. That was restored by Beged Ivri in 1992. The year 55 coin for 2003 was the 20th anniversary of the restoration of the biblical talit, and we honored that by placing that on the year 55 coin. The year 56 coin features the Chupat Chatanim, the canopy of bridegrooms, that dome-shaped crimson silk and gold wedding canopy, restored by Beged Ivri in 1992. The year 57 coin features the two silver trumpets restored by Gershon Solomon in the Temple Mount Faithful. These were the two silver trumpets that were used to announce Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, and also to go out to war and stuff like that. The year 58 coin features the Hatavat menorah. This is a vessel also made out of solid gold, restored by the Temple Institute in 1993, that was used to clean out remember the menorah, the big gold menorah that stood in the temple? That's the vessel that was used to clean out the cups and replace the wicks on top of the 7 branches of the menorah. The year 59 coin features the chest for new shekels. The chest for new shekels. We're going to speak about that in just a moment. The year 60 coin features the breastplate of the high priest's outfit. In 2004, the Temple Institute in Jerusalem completed a first draft of the high priest's outfit, and because there are 8 different components that make up the outfit, we're going to spread that out over 8 different coins. We started with the breastplate of the high priest's outfit. The year 61 coin features the silver fire pan that was used to bring the burning coals from the outer sacrificial altar into the temple for the daily burning of the incense, also restored by the Temple Institute in the early 90s. The year 62 coin features a new version of the prophetic 10-string Davidic lyre based on a Bar Kokhba quarter shekel from the year 132 from the Second Revolt, featuring the same lyre that was used in the Second Temple era. So you have Second Temple and Third Temple era instruments on the same coin. Now you look carefully at this when it comes around, you'll notice that this harp has no strings. Can you see that? Right? How did this happen? How do I make a coin? I do the artwork and I take it to the mint. And the mint gives it to their artist, and what they used to do is they used to take a big plastered disc and physically carve out what the coin would look like in positive, right? They'd carve it out, and then it would be put in a machine that would read the carvings and reproduce the carvings in a small metal master die. Right? Today they do that first stage by computer, which is a shame because I used to love to get those big plastered discs, you know? So now what they would do is, once they make the master die, they'll call me from the mint to come and okay the dies to begin minting the coins, right? And for me, when there's a new half shekel available, it's like a minor holiday for me. It's like, all right, new coin, you know? I'm alive another year, right? So I get to the mint and I take a look at the master die. It's a little thing, right? And I'm looking at it with my jeweler's loop and I go, wow, it's beautiful. Go ahead and make the first 500 coins. So they minted the first batch of coins. They actually delivered 493 coins. I take the first two to the photographer to make my blow-ups for my lecture, right? And I look at the photograph and I'm like, oy vey, there's no strings in the harp. What happened? The strings in the picture, right, the harp, the strings are made out of gut, and it was photographed against the beige wall. I knew it was a harp. He didn't know it was a he just faithfully reproduced what his eyeballs saw. He didn't see the strings. So introducing the year 62 type 1, the year 62 type 2, strings attached. That one's no strings attached. No, we created a rarity. Because like these coins go out in their thousands and there's only 493 of those and we killed the dies, right? The year 63 coin features the silver wine decanter that was used for the wine libations, for the wine offerings in the Holy Temple. The year 64 coin, last year's coin, features the golden pitcher that was used to replace the olive oil in the 7 branches of the menorah, right? Remember the previous vessel, the Hatavat menorah, was used to clean out the cups, replace the wicks, and then the oil would be refilled by this little vessel that was restored by the Temple Institute. It's also made out of solid gold. And this year's coin, drumroll, right, features the chest for old shekels. The chest for old shekels. Remember the year 59 coin was the chest for new shekels? This year's coin is the chest for old shekels. And I'm going to explain what those are in just a moment. Now, this is a year 50 coin, but it has a different reverse. Anybody recognize this logo on the back of the coin? Very good. It's the logo of the Israel Defense Forces. Why are we making a parallel series of coins with the reverse of the Israel Defense Forces? Because the half shekel was and is primarily a soldier's commandment, right? We begin to fulfill the commandments as responsible adults. The boys bar mitzvah age 13, the girls bar mitzvah age 12. What age do we begin giving the half shekel? Only at the age of 20. Why the age of 20? Because the age of 20 was the age of induction into the army. It's the only commandment in the entire Torah that doesn't begin at bar mitzvah, at birth, bar mitzvah, or bat mitzvah. It begins at the age of 20. What was the half shekel? It was the world's first insurance policy. It was an insurance policy for your soul that you gave on the day that you inducted into the army. If during the course of your service you caused harm, that harm did not tarnish your soul because of the half shekel you gave as an atonement for your soul on the day that you inducted into the army. We set up a program several years ago called Machatzit Shekel Lechayal, half a shekel for a soldier. You guys can now sponsor soldiers. We're sitting here in Spokane, Washington. Spokane, Washington. I'm learning. You ever been out in by Port Angeles, right? There's a town called Squim. But it doesn't read Squim. So I'm learning, Spokane. We're sitting here in Spokane, Washington, and we read and we hear about the young men and women that serve in the Israel Defense Forces, and your hearts go out for these young people. And you want to do something for what can you practically do for a soldier in the Israel Defense Forces from Spokane, Washington? One thing you can do is you can go to www.pizza, IDF, pizza like a pizza pie, Pizza IDF, Israel Defense Forces, pizzaidf.org, and a piping hot large pizza and ice cold 2-liter cola will be delivered to a group of soldiers at a roadside checkpoint somewhere in Israel. And they really deliver. The guy who runs it, his name is Menachem Kucher. He's a longtime immigrant from Australia. He's actually my webmaster, which is why I can't get anything updated on my website, because he is now the largest purveyor of pizza in Israel. Right? You remember in 2006 they forgot to bring food for the soldiers in the Lebanese War, Second Lebanese War. PizzaIDF.org delivered over 8,000 pizzas into Lebanon to feed our soldiers, right? So you can provide them with pizza and Coke, make them big and fat like me, or now you can provide for their souls. You buy a coin, I hand it to a soldier for free. Right? And you get a confirmation email on the day that your coin is delivered that today your coin was delivered into the hands of a soldier in the Israel Defense Forces. Thank you for supporting our soldiers. You can sponsor 1 soldier, 2 soldiers, 5 soldiers. As a community, you can sponsor an entire army base. Right? You buy the coins, we hand it to soldiers for free. Now, last year I instituted a new program. I came to Israel recruiting FBI agents. Did I have this last year? Right? What is an FBI agent? This is the coolest thing I've ever made, right? What is an FBI agent? Friends of Beged Ivri. And if they come to tackle you, just turn around real quick, show them who you are. Right? What is an FBI agent? An FBI agent is somebody who undertakes to take a booklet of 10 receipts and goes out and gets 10 of their friends, family, co-workers, whatever, to sponsor 1 or more soldiers. Anybody who completes a booklet of 10 receipts and sends the stubs into Jerusalem with payment gets a free postage-paid FBI T-shirt. And I think this is absolutely the coolest thing I've ever made. I mean, everything I made is cool, but this beats them all. FBI. Okay. Now, thus far I have spoken about the restoration of the ability to fulfill the commandment. Buying the coin, buying a half shekel is not fulfilling the commandment. Giving the half shekel is fulfilling the commandment. How do you give the half shekel? In the temple, there were 13 chests for the collection of funds. 2 of those chests were specifically for shekels. 1 chest was called new shekels, and 1 chest was called old shekels. This is the chest for new shekels. This is the chest that you deposit this year's coin into. If you merit to be in Jerusalem and you've acquired a coin on Purim, you go to this chest, make the blessing, drop the coin in. As soon as it enters the airspace of the chest, it becomes hektish, it becomes sanctified property. You have now fulfilled the commandment of giving the half shekel for this year. There was a second chest called old shekels. What are old shekels all about? Old shekels are for make-up years. For years in the past that you did not have the opportunity to fulfill the commandment, you can now make up for those years by depositing coins into the chest for old shekels. 1998, when I gave my first half shekel, I was 39 years old, which means from the age of 20 to 38, I hadn't fulfilled the commandment. When we dedicated the second chest for old shekels, I deposited 19 coins into that chest, counting out my ages, 20, 21, 22, all the way back up to 38, bought back all of the years that I'd missed in the past, and every year hereafter, I deposit 1 coin into the chest for new shekels. What is the spiritual message of the holy half shekel? What is the holy half shekel really all about? We're taught concerning this commandment that the rich shall not give more and the poor shall not give less, right? First thing that comes to mind when you hear that is rich and poor in pocket, right? The people who give the most money to the synagogue or the church, they get the chairs up front with the little name taggy things, right? Poor people are left in the back, right? Very often in Jerusalem, us religious characters, we have a tendency to consider ourselves spiritually wealthy, and we look upon secular and non-observant people as being spiritually poor. The half shekel comes to teach that that person who is so far from God in his own eyes, and I say in his own eyes because none of us are far from God, we're a breath away, but that person who is so far from God in his own eyes that he'll only check in for like a nanosecond between bites of a bacon cheeseburger on Yom Kippur kind of guy. And for those of you not laughing, we're not allowed to eat bacon cheeseburgers, and for sure not on Yom Kippur, it's a fast day, right? But that person is at least half a shekel. And the biggest rabbi in the biggest Rebbe's chair is only half a shekel. You know, in Israel, they try to get the Reform and Orthodox together. These guys won't even sit in the same room together. You get all these guys together, hand everybody a half shekel, and have the person up front open by acknowledging that in my eyes, each and every one of you are at least a half a shekel, and I am only half a shekel. And on the other hand, I'm at least a half a shekel, and each one of you are only half a shekel. Can we agree on that? Can we agree on that? We have now created the plane of equality upon which dialogue can take place. Equals cannot hate equals. You can only hate somebody you think is worth less than you. If you acknowledge that the person opposite you is at least a half shekel, you're only half a shekel, you can't hate each other. We're taught that the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. What is baseless hatred? It's when I consider myself a whole shekel and you're not worth a widow's mite. It's the ultimate manifestation of the equality of each and every one of us before God and before man. And that is the spiritual message of the holy half shekel. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less. Let me conclude. Actually, usually I conclude at this point, but I actually have something new to share with you today. And it's so new I don't even know how to work it into my lecture. So I'm going to conclude, and then I'm going to introduce it. Right? In the second year of the... seriously, it's like right off the plane new. Right? In the second year of the restoration of the holy half shekel, 5 minutes after Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year's, I get a phone call from a young rabbi named Yachad Witt. He calls me and he's all out of breath. He's like, Reuven, he goes, you're not going to believe this, right? And he was right, I didn't believe him. He comes to me the next day, he brings me the book that he had been studying over the holiday, and it's called Orchot Chaim, The Ways of Life. It's a compendium of teachings of a 10th century commentator that we refer to as the Rosh. And he wrote 1,000 years ago, you shall not diminish from giving less than half a shekel every year at one time. In other words, you cannot fulfill this commandment by giving a quarter shekel now and a quarter shekel next month. You have to give in one clip, one shot, once a year. So you know how a Jewish text works. You have the text, then you have the commentary on the text, then you have the commentary on the commentary on the text, and the commentary on the commentary and the commentary on the text. Jewish stuff, right? So this first commentator that we refer to as the Tosfos Yom Tov, he wrote this some 367 years ago, referring up to the text. He writes, Machatzit shekel b'kol shana, half a shekel every year. What's he talking about? What's he referring to? And his answer, which I've highlighted in orange in the text itself, is in parentheses, which is weird enough. He answers, Shehu b'shavi chetzi Prager kesef. It's the equivalent of Prager silver half shekel. Which means nothing in Hebrew, but my name is Reuven Prager, and I had just restored the half shekel the previous year. So this young rabbi goes, what do you think this means, right? So I'm looking at it, right? What's a half shekel? It's the equivalent of Prager silver half shekel. I said to him, well, obviously. He gives this nervous chuckle. He goes, he goes, what do you think it really means, right? So I wrote to my mom. I emailed my mom. I said, Mom, we found a rabbi who defines the half shekel as being the equivalent of Prager silver half shekel. She goes, great. Get his mailing list. All right. Any questions about anything that I've covered the whole day, whole evening, whole whatever we are? Yes?
Just a reiteration. Did you say when you're picking up
Yes, you gave two. You gave one for the half shekel you were giving, and one half shekel you were getting back in change. Like it's two transactions, right? Today it's not a problem because we're only minting half shekels, so you don't have the exchange fees, right? In fact, if you went with a half shekel, you had to pay the chalfani, you had to pay the tables, you had to pay a half shekel and one pruta because there's 5% of the coin is in silver, so you had to give a little bit extra, right? And if two Jews came together with a whole shekel, they were exempt from having to pay the pennies. So it's hidden to save a penny that we'd buddy up to give a whole shekel, right? But we don't have that. But we don't have it. We can tell who the born Jews are in this room, right? We don't have that problem with our coins because our coins are 999 fine. They're pure silver. Cool. Yes. Yes. Right.
Would you be able to do 5 full shekels, or does it have to be 10 times?
No, you can give 5 full shekels. Like if you have, we have established the criteria, the newly formed Sanhedrin has agreed that we have established the criteria for the half shekel for this and future generations. Like what is Jewish law on restoring the half shekel? It says that every generation that restores the half shekel restores it on two conditions. One, that it be not less silver content than the Tyrian half shekel. The coins that I pass around, the Tyrian half shekel was 7 grams of 95% silver. The whole shekel was 14 grams of 95% silver. So it can not be less than 7 grams of 95% silver. Our coins weigh in at 7.776 grams of 999 fine. So our quarters are our half shekels are 3/4 of a gram heavier and 5% purer than the Tyrian half shekel, and that meets that criteria, right? It could be not less silver, it could be more, right? And the second condition is that everybody has to give the same amount. Now, since we've established already for 16 years going, thousands of people are giving in their half shekels, we've established what the criteria for this and future generations is 1/4 troy ounce of 999 fine silver. So if you have an Engelhard half-ounce silver bar, that's good for 2 half shekels. If you have an Engelhard 1-ounce bar, that's good for 4 half shekels. So if you need to make up 10 years, you need to put in like 2.5 ounces of, but it's got to fit into the aperture. Right? The hole in the top of the chest. I think we made the hole for old shekels bigger than the one for new shekels. Because we wanted to restrict it to this size coin. Yeah. Cool. Ready for something new? So last year, I completed my first reading of the Babylonian Talmud. I started in 1985. That's how long it took me to finish it, right? So all of those years, what I wanted to learn next was the Midrash Rabbah. The Talmud is a legalistic work, and it's real complicated, and it takes forever to learn it. Midrash Rabbah is a compendium, a collection of all the Agadah, all of the legends of Jews, all the way back, right? And I buzzed through all 10 volumes in about 4.5 months. What did I find? I found an exact description of the tribal flags when we were encamped around the tabernacle when we came out of Egypt, right? We encamped according to tribe around the tabernacle, each under our banner, each under our flag. And I am reintroducing, for the first time in long time, right, the flag of Levi. This is the Levites' tribal flag. It's described as 1/3 white, 1/3 black, and 1/3 red, with the Urim and Tumim embroidered in the middle. Now, we don't know what the Urim and Tumim were, or what they look like, but we know they were deposited within the Choshen, within the breastplate of the high priest. So whenever the Urim and Tumim are depicted, they're depicted as the breastplate of the high priest. So I'm reintroducing the tribal flag for the tribe of Levi. Have any of you ever been to my house in Jerusalem? No. So I live in downtown on the 6th floor, overlooking Machne Yehuda Market, the outdoor market, which is this 10 square block, like dead center of Jerusalem, right? On the 6th floor, there's now a flagpole coming out of my building. Flying the flag of Levi. I am raising the banner of Levi. I made a full-size flag. I made the desk top size, right? And for Levites only, the lapel pin. Is that cool or is that cool? Now, ironically, these are also the colors of the flag of the of Egypt, and the flag of Syria, and the flag of the 1986 Arab Rebellion. So they have now something else they can scream that we stole from them, right? Except that their flags are about 35 years old, and ours is about 4,000 years old, right? So how you like that? I don't know how to work that into my lecture yet, but this is the flag of the tribe of Levi. All right. Yes? Funny you should ask. Just so happen to have here the graphics. Where it's a work in the works, right? Some of them, a couple of them I'm satisfied with, and most of them I'm not yet. So this is the flag of Yosef, the flag of Joseph. It describes It describes the flag of Yosef as being black with Mitzrayim, Egypt, embroidered in the center. I'm not happy with this one yet, but this is so far what we've come up with. Anybody has a better idea how to depict Egypt, I'm willing to listen. Issachar. You know, how do you say in English? Issachar. Yisachar? Yisachar. So its flag is also black, and depicted on it is the sun and the moon. So we went to Google Images, and all we could find suns and moons had these stupid little faces on them, right? So Sagit, who does the beautiful artwork over there, her 10-year-old daughter, Batsheva, right, who said, all right, we need a sun and moon. And that's what she came up with, and I think we're going to go with this. I like this flag for Yisachar. This, of course, is Levi. You saw it already. The flag of Asher. The flag of Asher is this color, and it depicts on it an olive tree. By vote of hands, who likes this side? Who likes this side? Right, so we're undecided on that yet. Undecided. I got to make a play on that. Zvulun. Flag is white, features a ship. I like this one. We're going to go with this one for Zvulun. Zvulun. Now, here's another one we got a problem with. This is Gad. As you know, Gad. Gimel Daled. Not God. Gad. God. Anyway. So it says its flag is not white and not black, which by us is gray, right? And embroidered on it is a machaneh, an army camp. So again, Google Images, the coolest tent that I could find, but it looks like a circus tent. And it might be copyrighted, so we might not be able to use it. So we came up with this one. I'm not satisfied with it either. So this one's, God is still a work in progress. Benjamin, includes the colors of all the other flags, and in the center is a wolf. My graphic artist loves this one. I'm not in love with it yet. Okay. Yehuda, Judah. This is the color of the flag depicting a lion. By raise of hands. By raise of hands. See, the last group was just the opposite. So, some said that if you take the crown off, like this is the lion used in the municipality of Jerusalem's logo, right? This is Barclays Bank, right? They got it's a nice lion, right? So some people suggested taking the crown off of that and putting it on that. I don't know. We'll come up with something. Naphtali. This one I'm satisfied with. This is Naphtali. This one's a funny one. You're going to love this one. Okay, I'll save that best for last. This is Dan. And I like this one, but somebody told me that this is the wrong. What snake did they say to replace it with?
That's a king cobra. You want to have.
So we need to change it for an Egyptian snake, which would have been more. But I mean, I love this one, but they said it's India, it's not Egypt. Now, and then there's also Reuven. Reuven, we have a problem with Reuven's flag because it portrays a mandrake, dudaim, a mandrake. We haven't found a good picture of a mandrake. We can't use the root of the mandrake because it's obscene, and the top of the mandrake. No, really, have you ever seen the roots? Like, I would not put that in a family. We want to hang these in schoolrooms, right? Right. But the flower, it's got a green base and then a purple flower, but we haven't found the perfect mandrake picture. So if anybody has a great picture of a mandrake, email it to me. Love apples. And I don't know what. All right, now. Love apples. All right, the flag of Shimon. This was the biggest problem for me, Shimon. The flag is green, and it says embroidered upon it is Shechem, the city of Shechem. Shechem, Nablus, Shechem. How do you depict the city of Shechem, right? So we found a painting from 1844, but you could be anywhere, right? So we went further into the commentaries on that flag, right? What did I come up with? You're going to love this. They say, why Shechem, right? Why is Shechem depicted on the flag? It says, Biglal ha-gvura u-mesirat nefesh, because of the bravery and the self-sacrifice. What was the story of Shechem? Shechem raped Dinah, right? And then wanted to marry her. And Shimon and Levi went to Shechem and said, you want to join our people? No problem, circumcise yourselves. Because far be it from us to have somebody uncircumcised in part of the community, right? So they all circumcised themselves, and 3 days later, Shimon and Levi went and killed them all, right? So this, it's called a Mogen Avraham. It's used in the circumcision. All right, we have an expression in Hebrew, Hamevin Yavin. He who understands will understand. Everybody else will think it's a harp. And I'm going with this one. Cool. I support my ministry by the work of my hands. I make all the garments myself. All the artwork on this table are made by 2 single moms up in Sfat and Safed in the north who do beautiful artwork and have no gisha, no way to market them. So please, you be supporting 2 single moms with, one's got 3 daughters, one has 1 daughter. Buy up all the artwork. Thank you for inviting me once again. And thank you for all coming out and laughing at my jokes. We're going to have to get some more new people for next year. And thank you so much. If you come up with questions in the middle of the night, I do answer my emails. If we get lucky enough to get Wi-Fi reception in our hotel rooms, I'll answer you within like the next city. And thank you so much for hosting us once again. And please send us home with a blessing so Seth doesn't have to pack up anything, because he's getting old and tired. I want to stand up for a minute. This is my buddy. We were housemates. We were housemates in Jerusalem in 1983 to 84, the year that I started Beged Ivri. He was the guy I bounced all my crazy ideas off of, right?
You did it anyway.
Anyway, great. Thank you so much, and thanks for hosting us once again. Give me a hand moving this table. I want to move the table out. I want to move it away.
You want we can move that up to the stage and get that away for you?
Or even right here is good.
You want we can move it up there so it's absolutely okay.
Nobody's going to come back here anyway.
Okay. All right.
At least not for now.
Yeah.
All right. How was that?
That's great.
Cool. Well, it helps when
I like
people laugh at your jokes.
Oh, yeah.
When you get a group that don't laugh.
Yeah, Seth was telling me he can give me some pointers. If you'd like to purchase something, Reuven's helper Seth here at the very front of the table, he'll take your money.
We're very familiar with it. Like this is just a quickie one. You can download this from the website for our morning prayers, messianic worship. And again, we're not promoting any one form or style of halakha, but we also have CDs. So if you want to get a new song for how these are sung to kind of get started.
With my study of Hebrew progressions,
Yes.
I'm learning how to pronounce the Greek and the Hebrew.
This is what's cool. Okay, you have the Hebrew, right? Shema Tohu, Halakha, Yaakov, Israel. And right down here, Israel. And then you have the English translation. And this was picked up right from that's where Reuven so if you wanted to save yourself a few years of having to click away and find the right letters on the font, if you need some of this for your community, all you would have to do is he would give you the file where it says L'chavrat Mashiach. You can put Yeshua. You know, and honestly incorporate this. And then tefillah is prayer. Yes. So basically morning prayers in the morning, which would be so and then here's Erev Shabbat for at home. You know, if you want to take one home for Erev Shabbat, or even if you had a formal gathering. And each one of these has a little intro, let people know where in the scriptures, you know, find a lot of information about prayer. Basically starting.
How interesting this is read right into that.
Yes, and then there's a literal there's a readable translation after each one of these. For those who want to know, also Birkat Hamazon after eating, because we have all these after you eat, pray. That's when we usually do our community prayer, anointing the Lord, and things like that. Shabbat day. This is our Bima copy because I put notes in here on things I've been mistranslating. So whenever you see a folded page, there's usually something I've underlined, like umi instead of ome. You know, and so, but yeah, we'll go through the English, or Hebrew, we'll sing it according to traditional Nusach. And then afterwards, during our service, we'll meet all the congregation, each one. Sometimes, you know, you may decide to do it differently. You may decide to do all Hebrew, all English. You may decide to do all Hebrew and then all English. Kavanah, intent of heart going in. Things like, you know, when we do our introduction, we like to give the gospel every Shabbat. You know, so that's how we really are. Again, we have more stairs. Oh, this is something that the Lord put upon my heart several years ago. We read this every Shabbat because we want the news of salvation. Visitors come. Who are you? What is it? Yeshua. We've had some Jewish people here that and they'll come in and they'll sit down and okay, they won't say Yeshua right up front, so we can never say you know, because we look very, you know, on Shabbat day we dress up, you know, and have a good time with it. And so if there are some conservative or even Reformed Jews that Food for Christians is kind of funny because, well, there's a few interesting protections that we put on that website. You know, purposeful not translations, but it's translated it accurately, but they might mispronounce a few things, like Elohim, just to protect the name and stuff, which is kind of neat. If you didn't know, you would wonder why they do that. So anyway, but you'd be welcome, talk to Ray. We'd share resources. We're sharing, actually. Not to try to become more homogenous. We don't care about uniformity. It's unity, especially if you're Messiah. I wasn't sure if you were personally. So I'm glad you came. Yeah.
Are kind of hidden by the shirt.
That's okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and other things too, like conferences, reference Bible.
There's just a UMJA conference.
We have one every year in June, particularly in maybe we'll end up traveling. It was funny. Every year we also, Lord willing, try to
She wants Mama. I don't. Oh, she's sitting now. You probably take her.
More so. Right. And so the idea is we don't want to do the reason why we chose the some of our formal gatherings but things like this are more word by word.
And so much fun to do that. That's just another.
Oh, it's good.
I would love to do it, but I already did.
We have, let's say here, one word at a time. I'm sorry. Identify the word.
Oh, really? Oh, no. I think I met them. Actually, at the last.
But yeah, I mean, we really well teachers, people want to ask questions. Go read okay, that's why that's a focus. Or that's why it's a silent that's why it's and then after about 4 or 5 months, anybody who's never read Hebrew before Thursday Raw, however, teaching more advanced classes where it's going to be somebody who needs to go home and really study the Torah in Hebrew. But the other ones are people that are just kind of Tuesday night is more for those who are just casually learning in the place to come. Need something to do. Mainly 2 verses. the vowel points. When the word is by itself, the vowels are like this. There's usually a vowel at the last, and then this vowel becomes this vowel, that vowel becomes this vowel. Why does it do that? You know, we'll discuss the word. And most of the time you'll be like, I figured out how to pronounce that string Prager. That guy will become you know. So you keep running into Joshua.
Yes, I just run into him twice as laboring. What'd you call him?
This is Harvell.
You'll get a kick out of this. Josh and David was one of had no idea what it meant. My parents didn't know what it meant. Yeah, my dad's name is David Joseph.
Well, I think my wife wants me to come over and help her spend some money.
Have fun with that.
I have been able to get to the other